Sitting in for George Norrie tonight on this Friday the 13th. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, David Wilcock, who is a professional lecturer. He's a filmmaker. He's a researcher of ancient civilizations, consciousness science, and new paradigms of matter and energy. His upcoming Hollywood film, Convergence, unveils the proof that all life on Earth is united in a field of consciousness, which affects our minds in fascinating ways. He is the author of course, The Ascension Mysteries, The Synchronicity Key, and The Source Field Investigations, and is featured on Gaia TV with his wisdom teachings. I'd like to welcome back to Coast, our good friend David Wilcock. David, good evening.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm doing good, David. Hey, normally at this point of the show, I'll, say, what have you been up to? Because I haven't talked to somebody in about a year or so. But in our case, we just spent New Year's over at our house, had a great party, and we kind of whooped it up a little bit, didn't we?
Yes, we did. I was responsible for distributing the party poppers and ensuring that they all discharged over your lovely dinner table.
We picked out Wilcock streamers for 3 days. So, yeah, it was a great party, man. And I kind of actually want to start with that little get-together with this conversation that we're going to have tonight because, as you know, as we had a pretty eclectic crowd of friends gathered for dinner, right? Some pretty powerful minds were there.
It was a freak show. It
was great. And one of the subjects that went on for a long time was Antarctica. And I do want
loud.
Yeah, and
it got loud.
It did. So I want to start there because you've been writing about that, and you and I have been talking about it a lot over the last month, certainly. But since then, since New Year's, you've got a whole bunch of updated info. So I kind of want to start there, and then we'll wing it. We'll go freestyle after that. How's that?
Well, yeah. I mean, we could talk about the new intel and not even get through all of it in all the time we have for the show.
Yeah, and I'm afraid of that too as well. So let's for the audience that may not know, over the last month and a half of 2016. A lot of strange events were unfolding down in Antarctica. Of course, we had Buzz Aldrin, we had Kerry on Election Day, we had officials from the Vatican.
Sure.
Are all winging it down there. What do you think that they were there to see?
Well, let's first of all frame the context of the discussion. You and I have talked about this WikiLeaks revelations about elite child sex trafficking and how disturbing that is, and we don't really want to talk about that in the air. I don't want to get into that.
Right.
But nonetheless, everybody has become aware of it. It was the number one trending search term in early December of last year. And this is a very, very serious problem for the elite because it is a rampant problem within their ranks. And in fact, there is a great deal of truth to the investigation. So I think everybody is now being presented with this. A lot of people maybe for the first time, and it strikes them as really shocking. And then the idea that this is happening is just so upsetting that they would rather act as if it's not true than really investigate it very deeply.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting about all of that stuff, without going into it, even if some of it is not true and some of it is, that doesn't matter. What it does reveal is the power of the internet, and people will start to go and do their own research. And the network gets together and starts compiling, and then it is spoken about. And that is where the elite is certainly a little bit nervous because everything is now focused right back on them, and other details are going to come forward too.
So what happened is I wrote an article on my website, Divine Cosmos, after a long absence. I really did not want to get into the Trump versus Hillary thing. I had done a show with John B. Wells, actually, and I kind of was talking about politics, and that was the last public statement I'd made. So I really was I disappeared for like 2 or 3 months. And I just did not, because you know what? You talk about the election, and no matter which perspective you take, there's just this avalanche of hatred. Like, it was so incredibly contentious.
Yeah. You know what I chose to do is just to be equally vicious on both sides. That way I couldn't lose. Because you're absolutely right. It damaged families and friendships, and people probably lost jobs over saying one name or the other.
No question.
Yeah.
But here's the big problem, right? I already had been talking about for years other WikiLeaks that had said, where somebody is writing Hillary a letter and they're joking about sacrificing a chicken to Moloch.
Right.
What?
Right.
Nobody jokes about that.
Right.
And so she was very highly implicated in all these WikiLeaks revelations about this pizza stuff. And so clearly in the voting booth, you can't vote for that. And I think a lot of people just basically bowed out because it was like it was a choice between two unacceptable candidates.
Yeah, there's no question about that. There's no question.
In my personal world, for those who don't know this, as a result of having had a website online since 1999, my own website, back when it was very difficult to make them, and actually having published material online since 1996 in Richard C. Hoagland's forum is how I got started. I was an enormous coast-to-coast listener back in the day. That was the only show around. And so I was, on the edge of my seat every night listening to Coast and very much wanted to break into that scene. And I spent years and years trying before it actually worked. And, as a result of the first time I got on Coast was in 2001. And it was an enormous response. For me at the time, getting 400 emails of people I hadn't known before was huge.
Right.
And so I have had, as a result of being on Coast twice in 2 weeks, I got invited to Disclosure Project, which was in May 2001. And when I was there, I got to meet 39 different people who came forward and said that they had been involved in UFO-related top-secret projects for the government. And that stuff is now a legend, and even though it was 16 years ago, it's absolutely as fresh and relevant today as it ever was the day that it was done.
Yeah, it certainly is.
So I want people to be aware of the fact that there is a movie called Sirius that I'm in with Dr. Stephen Greer, and in that movie, it's openly acknowledged by Greer and everybody who made the movie that I was there at that event. So some people have said, oh, David is lying and David doesn't have any insiders. Well, wait a minute. We can prove that I was at this thing 15 years ago, almost 16 now, in which 39 insiders were present. I'd already been meeting insiders before that, and as a result of becoming steadily more exposed publicly since 2001, since I did that, I have had people approach me who actually are surprisingly high-ranking, surprisingly influential. People, I have at least 2 insiders who directly advised sitting presidents of the United States, directly worked with top people in all the major intelligence agencies, people that were involved in defense contractors, and there's a whole world that starts at 35 levels of secrecy above the president. And that's where it gets into what's called cosmic clearance, or the longer term would be cosmic top secret.
Right.
It's only once you get cosmic clearance that you begin to understand what's going on, that you begin to be let in. You're like now the Boy Scout, the amateur, And so the president is never given anything because they don't want, for example, if their crimes were ever found out about and there was some kind of South African Truth and Reconciliation Committee or Nuremberg war crime trial, that kind of thing, last thing they want to do is have the president crying on the trial stand and sing like a songbird and say, oh, the government has been lying to you all about UFOs. They don't want that.
No, they can't have it.
So they're not going to ever let that happen. They can't let somebody could kidnap the president, right? Somebody could torture the president. They don't want him to know anything because then he can't talk.
Well, the question constantly gets asked of me to turn around and ask you, or for me to answer for you, which is, Where does David get his whistleblowers? How is this possible?
Well, I'm trying to build a foundation here, Jimmy, because I think it's very important that your listener be able to follow me on this journey without intrinsically assuming that I am somehow pulling this out as a hoax or a fable or some kind of
fantasy
attempt to just make myself look good.
Right.
I have had a very hard time doing this. I have had vastly, vastly more online hate directed towards me than what would take for 100 millennials to commit suicide.
Yeah, I don't know how you deal. I don't know how you deal with it. I deal with it on my own little small scale, and some of it we deal with together. But as you know, but you're at another level of that, and you have to have some very thick skin for sure.
I up until I think it was 2011 that I started to quarantine myself. But up until 2011, I had basically had 10 years of seeing at least 6 very, very venomously hateful comments directed to me personally every single day. No days off, no weekends, no holidays, for 10 years. And the most insanely outrageous, toxic, incredible hatred. And one of the things that I find so disconcerting is that I was often accused of having no proof to back up these claims. And so I would go into extensive, extraordinary depth of scientific rigor to such an extreme that my first book alone has well over 1,000 academic references. My second book has nearly 700, and my third book has another like 300, 400. And yet people say, oh, David has no proof.
Yeah, it's not enough.
So,
well, it'll never be enough, David.
Yeah, and that's what I finally have come to is like people are just going to make up stories and they're going to say whatever they want. And nothing that I do and no level of integrity that I try to preserve is ever going to change the voice of the negative. They're always going to say the same thing. And there's probably 3 most common arguments that I hear the most. Number one, David has a huge ego. Everybody wants to say that. And I don't really understand where that's coming from. I do think that because we're in such an embattled field here, that I may have in the past said some things that sounded like I was bragging or pumping myself up. But I think when we're all so embittered and we're getting bayoneted in the trenches by the enemy here, and we fight so many years to bring out the truth to people who don't even really seem to want it or care.
Right.
And we don't really see that much progress in the open world. And skeptics for year after year after year can say, David's been saying that we're going to get disclosure. David's been saying the government's going to tell us the truth. And it didn't happen, and it's not happening, and it's not going to happen. Blah, blah, blah. You know, this thing goes on, and it doesn't appear that anything really changes. So I think part of why people have accused me of having a huge ego is that I'm extremely confident and I'm extremely outgoing and very fluent on stage, and they have this intrinsic belief that if you are saying something that's fringe, if you're saying something that doesn't agree with their belief system, that you're supposed to be really apologetic and kind of
right.
depressed,
and you're not. Let me jump in right there. We've got to take a break right here. Our guest tonight is David Wilcock, and when we come back, as promised, we will talk about Antarctica. Our guest, David Wilcock. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Coast to Coast AM. All right, welcome back to Coast. Sitting in for George Norrie tonight, I'm your host, Jimmy Church, and our guest is David Wilcock. Now, David, right before the break, we started to get into Antarctica, and I just want to back up and ask again, why all of the activity with Kerry and Buzz Aldrin and the Vatican? What's the interest? What have you been told? Okay,
so again, I see where you're going, and I want to do a couple more things before we get to answer that question. Because,
Okay, David. I get it.
Without the context, it's useless. So the context is this. We have been dealing for 100 years with a hijacked financial system in which European elites had the American dollar outsourced to them with what's called the Federal Reserve System, as everybody knows. And we, Americans, basically said, we don't know enough to be able to run our own money system, so we're going to hand it over to these European billionaires, and they're going to be better able to handle it than we are because they're businessmen. They'll know how to invest it. Well, what's happened is that the value of the dollar has decreased by about 97% in those 100 years.
Right.
And it turns out, as everybody knows, that this money that they're printing is based on nothing. And because the U.S. dollar up until now is still what's called the global reserve currency, everyone else's value of their economy is based on the strength of the dollar or lack thereof. And they're slated based on their weight against the dollar. So the Federal Reserve can print as much dollars as it wants and doesn't have to be backed by anything, and they can effectively control who lives and who dies, who eats and who starves. So a very important part of this Antarctica discussion is to understand that no, contrary to what some conspiracy theorists want to assert, it is not a worldwide conspiracy. It is not something where they control all the governments, all the militaries, all the financial systems. That is not true. There are plenty of people in the world who are flaming pissed off at the Federal Reserve and at what we've been calling the cabal. Some people call it the New World Order, the Illuminati. The cabal is a more neutral term. It's less scary sounding.
Right.
So that's what we've been using.
Right.
So this international alliance got very strongly activated after 9/11 because, much like the Roswell crash clearly was not a weather balloon, 9/11, with buildings collapsing into their own footprint, is clearly not the result of Arabs with box cutters. And isn't it interesting that his passport just happens to land face up at the bottom of the Trade Center,
Yeah, still one of the great head scratchers of all time.
And why did it happen on the occult 2,000-year anniversary of the birth of Christ, as defined in a Bible code,
Right.
This was a very occult act, done with very precise timing for a goal, and the goal was, of course, this 5-inch tall stack of legal documents that was known as the USA Patriot Act that was a blueprint for turning America into a fascist dictatorship and shredding the Constitution, which conveniently pops up just a couple weeks after 9/11. So a lot of people are aware of this. The problem is that the cabal has had a large degree of control over the press, and that includes television, movies, print media, etc.
Right.
So there has been an alliance working very quietly behind the scenes, and they have been working with ever-increasing effectiveness to try to bring down this corrupt global organization. Well, this has taken, it's really, really gotten into a very active phase in which the alliance is now stronger and more powerful than the cabal. And yet, the alliance is doing a cleanup operation in which most of the cabal will already have been completely defeated and completely wiped out before we ever hear a word about it. So one thing other that I need to say before we get into Antarctica, because this is all very important,
Sure.
is that if you study the history of banana republics, communist or fascist type dictatorship situations in which there is a coup and in which the existing regime is overthrown, you don't ever hear about the coup until it actually happens. The people that do the coup cannot say anything about it. They just do it.
Right.
They do all the planning behind the scenes, and most of the work is done behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yep.
And the other classic saying is, in order to kill the king, you need the assistance of the palace guards. And so what this means is, the equivalent of the palace guards in our time would be the military and the intelligence services. And so this is what's happening. the WikiLeaks exposures that turned into Pizzagate were the direct result of the Palace Guards. And Assange has already been saying, look, guys, it's not the Russians. It's the U.S. intelligence services. It came from within. They knew what was there. They didn't like it. They said, enough is enough. We're done. So the people in the cabal have been aware ever since 9/11 took place that they really, really badly botched it. It was meant to be a lot more effective. It was meant to be a lot more clean. So even though most people think 9/11 was a success for the cabal, there were many, many, many loose ends and unanswered questions that they had hoped to have neatly tied up, and it didn't work that way. Just like when they hoped to find chemical weapons in Iraq, they didn't find them, because actually the teams that were supposed to plant the fake weapons got fragged and were killed before they could actually put them in position. They had no idea where the fake stuff was located, so they couldn't actually find it.
Interesting.
And this is all stuff you hear when you start hanging out with the kind of insiders I know who literally were advisors to presidents. So what's happening now is that the cabal is absolutely out of time. The alliance is now more powerful than they are. And 9/11 was a botched job where they didn't get what they wanted. And they knew that it was only a matter of time before they were going to be exposed. So they have had a plan in the works as sort of like the final get-out-of-jail-free card that they've built for themselves, so that when the time comes that 9/11 truth goes mainstream, when the time comes that they cannot keep the doors closed on this thing, what could they do? Is there any possible way, once there's already war crimes tribunals, once the top bankers, or whatever you want to call them, the top industrialists, the top warmongers, once they're actually on trial, once they're actually in front of the world and accounting for their crimes, what can they whip out that might give them clemency, that might get them to be seen more favorably by the public?
Right, right. And so in this complex game that we're playing here, how many moves away are we from checkmate?
It's already over. It's raining in California. And
right.
That's the sign that it's over.
Right. That's funny, David. That's funny. But
I have been saying to people, everybody who knows me personally I've been saying ever since the drought really became a big thing 4 years ago, is when it really started to be talked about as a big thing.
Right.
I've been saying, look, why do actual meteorologists call this thing the ridiculously resilient ridge?
Yeah.
Why is there this high pressure zone off the west coast of California over the ocean that absolutely positively never allows rain to hit our state?
Ever.
And anybody that says, oh, you know,
we get rain
in HAARP and that it's the cabal,
right.
Oh, they just want to punish those California hippies. No. This is where all the food is grown.
That's right.
This is an attack against America itself.
That's right. That's right. I've been talking about this for a long time, and most people don't realize it. And if you are going to control something, you need to control the end, the beginning, the middle, the production, the distribution, and everything else. And it all stems right here in California. Most, they don't realize if they want fresh strawberries in December in Wisconsin, where do you think they're coming from?
Exactly.
So
yeah. What we're dealing with is European elites who feel that in their game of where they own both sides of a conflict and they play both sides against the middle, it's called the pincers movement in war.
Exactly.
They feel that America has never suffered enough in World War I, World War II, etc. So they feel now it's America's turn for the next big world war, or whatever we can get away with. We got to punish America. And that's what they were trying to do. They were literally trying to create mass starvation, mass chaos in America, cutting off the food supply through this action. And it got pretty dangerously close, but it never really worked. And what I've been calling the alliance, when we're saying the alliance, we're dealing now with a majority of all the personnel in the intelligence services, of which there are, according to Steve Pachenik, there's 15, and Steve Pachenik's an important person we can talk about in a minute.
Right.
You're dealing with the top levels of the military. The majority of all these groups have now gone over to the alliance. They are not working for the cabal. In fact, the cabal is very much in the minority. There's been a huge anti-cabal revolution in Europe, in particular even Great Britain. You know, a lot of people blame England for this, but the English government has largely now gone against the cabal. That's what the Brexit thing was all about. There's all kinds of stuff about elite pedophilia and criminality in the British press. They're really on it. Actually, more than we've been. America's been behind Britain in terms of how much they're taking on the cabal. Anyway, what's gone on is that we are now at a point in which the cabal has been exposed by WikiLeaks. And the WikiLeaks exposures were obviously done at the most politically useful time they could have been done, during an election. That's where everybody wants to be educated about politics so they can make an informed choice of their vote.
Right.
And then what happens is the cabal is actually now being wiped out. The factions that are refusing to surrender are mostly in underground facilities, and if they don't surrender, they are literally having Marines cutting their way in with blowtorches into these underground facilities that are locked up and garrisoned up. These guys are cutting their way in, and if the people that are inside do not surrender, then they are literally being wiped out. And by wiped out, I mean shot and killed. That's where we're at right now. There are multiple underground bases that are being cleaned out right as we speak. In fact, most of it's already done. The people that are running the cabal are already on the run. They're already trying to find their escape plans. Most of these people are not elected officials, and you would not know who they are if you saw them. So this is big, big, big stuff. And when we are at the point where Pizzagate is the number one most talked about subject on the Internet, in which there are so many videos that are so damning that even the fake stream media, that's a term I just came up with.
Yeah, nice.
In the last few days. The fake stream media that actually has the audacity to call anybody who's daring to write their own independent journalism and do their own research, oh, well, you're fake news. And then to marshal their monopoly over the Internet and over the press to actually block your news from distribution on the platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and Google, which includes Gmail, which means you're not even going to get the email from your friend that wants to send you this information.
Right, right.
It's totally unconstitutional. It's totally crazy.
How large is when we're dealing with Antarctica and we're talking about this underground situation? Does it go from east west, north south? Well, you're at the bottom of the pole, so I guess it would be south south or north north. But is it occupying and spread out all over the continent?
All right, so let me try to steer this back in because obviously we made promises and we can't set this thing up forever. The setup is very important, but I get what you're trying to do here.
No, it's just that you were talking about what the Marines were doing, and I'm just wondering if that was...
Some of these bases are in Antarctica, yep. Some
right.
of the ones that are being penetrated are in Antarctica.
Right.
So what we need to understand here is that the lost continent of Atlantis, if you want to find it, you look at Antarctica. And what happened is the Earth went through a magnetic, or actually Earth crustal displacement, a pole shift. And what was Atlantis and was at one time subtropical, the Earth's position actually shifted, and the flood that we've all heard about as Noah's Ark, and also, it appears in so many other ancient mythologies around the world,
mm-hmm.
It started with a flood, but then it immediately quick froze, and it became the icy continent Antarctica. So this is why we see maps that were copied over from older maps in the Vatican that accurately depict what Antarctica looks like underneath the ice, which we didn't know until International Geophysical Year 1959, when they first used sonar to map out the land under the ice.
Right.
How the heck did these guys in the 1400s, 1500s know what it was going to look like?
Right.
Well, because it used to be inhabited.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. With that pole shift, well, there's two possibilities here. We have continental drift, where Antarctica could have moved into the position that it's in, or the entire Earth, did a shift too as well, or it could have been a combination of both.
Sure, and I think it's important to understand here that we don't really understand the physics of why the Earth rotates on its axis. We don't even understand what the core of the Earth is. Now, the traditional interpretation of why the Earth is magnetic is, it's got a core of iron. It turns out that if you go any more than 3 miles below the surface of the Earth, it already is so hot that the melting point of iron breaks down and it would no longer have a magnetic field. So even the whole explanation that we have right now of the Earth's magnetic field is totally wrong. And now we got to get into plasma physics and the idea of a plasma that's very hot and can conduct magnetic energy.
Right.
So we don't know why the Earth rotates, but what we have heard from insiders and a variety of sources is that if you have a really bad nuclear exchange, a nuclear bomb goes off, that nuclear explosion is disruptive energetically enough that it can actually change the equilibrium of a planet's axis. And that's apparently what happened. If you read Plato's original account of the fall of Atlantis and the Timaeus and Critias, they were talking about how the area of Egypt had repelled an invasion from the Atlanteans. And it seemed like everybody was happy and everything was fine, and then all of a sudden they have this huge flood. So the part that you don't hear is that the Egyptians or whoever was in that region, which includes the original Aryans, which became Siberia after this happened, and then they migrated down into India and Iran and then on over into Europe eventually. But these peoples, after they'd repelled the invaders, they wanted to finish the war, and they dropped a nuke on them, or several nukes, and the Earth flipped on its axis.
All right, let's take a break right there. Our guest tonight, David Wilcock, talking Atlantis and Antarctica and what is going on down south, and we're going to get to the bottom of all of this. This is a Coast to Coast AM special event. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. More with David Wilcock after this short break. Welcome back to Coast, filling in for George tonight. It is me, your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight's David Wilcock. And now, I do want to let everybody know, and especially to you, David, Twitter is completely on fire tonight. And on top of that, the phones, which we haven't opened up yet, have been jammed all night long. So we've got a lot of people interested in what's going down right now. And I've got a pile of questions off of Twitter. And I promise that I will get to those. So don't let me forget, okay? Are you with me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Back to where we were. Antarctica, the pole shift.
Maybe now I should start doing the electric David Wilcock tap dancing.
Yeah, right.
My informational download by about double or triple.
Yeah.
I'm trying to talk more slowly so people can get into this before we really go crazy.
You want me to do it to music?
Whenever you want me.
Yeah, exactly. I knew you'd do it. Thank you, David. All right. Yeah. Okay. So we were just talking about the pole shift and what Antarctica used to be. That's where we left off.
And I want to point out here that I don't really know when this Antarctica was Atlantis idea came into vogue. It may be traceable back to somebody like Immanuel Velikovsky. I do know that the first time I encountered it was in Graham Hancock's legendary work, Fingerprints of the Gods, which I read soon after graduating college in 1995, and it just blew me away. Another book that kind of took that idea, and Graham Hancock, by the way, back in that book in 95, did have the pictures of the maps, which I'd seen in other books going back to the 70s, showing that these maps from the 1400s, 1500s, actually showed what Antarctica looked like under the ice, even though it wasn't actually explored until the 1800s, and even after the mid-1800s is when they really started to get a sense of what it looked like.
Right.
So how did they have it on these maps? So it turns out that you got Graham Hancock writing about this in 1995, and another source, which is going to become very historic as this all unfolds in front of the public, was the work of Rand and Rose Flemath in a book called When the Sky Fell, which came out, I think, a few years after Graham Hancock's, though I'm not sure about that. But I remember reading it in roughly 1998, somewhere around there. And their scholarship is truly incredible because they have comparative world mythology from all over the world about this epic flood. And they make a very compelling case that there is a worldwide memory of some type of catastrophic event. And if you track what Graham Hancock's been doing more recently, we see that there are actually traces of radioactive energy all over the planet in the form of iridium, suggesting that there was, in fact, a very sudden catastrophic event that did suddenly change sea levels in a very dramatic way very quickly.
That's right.
So this is no longer a question in which geologists can say, oh, this was a gradual change. No, the new scholarship is there was a very sudden, very dramatic, and very catastrophic change. And it is conceivable that the Earth's axial position could shift. Just because we haven't seen it happen doesn't mean it couldn't. So all of the pieces start to line up, but where it really is going to come into its fruition is archaeology. And when we get back into some of the stuff that the insiders will tell you, if you have what they call high friends in low places, that's where you start to find out that the Germans were aware of mythological links to Antarctica and the possibility of something being down there. And even before World War II, they were already using their U-boats, which are submarines, and going down there, and they found that there were caverns that are open to the sea, and you can literally sail right into these caverns and find these pockets underneath the ice in which there is land from the continental mass below the ice that's still visible. So they sail in there, they land on these land masses, and they walk around, and before too long, with their expeditionary teams, and of course they've got tanks and things like that, they can drive around, and they deploy soldiers and war materiel and everything, and what do they find? They find ruins of intelligently built structures in Antarctica. So this has been going on for a long time. This started in 1939. And the Germans actually built a base there that they call New Berlin. And that base still is in existence. So this is something that has a great deal of history behind it. And I have been speaking to insiders for many years who were aware of ruins being found in Antarctica. What's different, and where I come to you today, is that we now know for a fact that the cabal is planning to announce officially on an open level the discovery of ruins in Antarctica. And they're going to do this once they are already in the midst of war crimes tribunals in which they are being outed and their plans and their identities are being outed officially.
Is that so the focus would shift off of the trials and to Antarctica, through the media and public as well?
I think the idea would be if somebody has beaten his wife and he doesn't want to get a divorce and he wants to maintain control of her, what's he going to do? He's going to go buy her a dozen roses and a box of chocolates.
Right.
Right?
Kobe did it.
I went to college and I studied, I actually worked on a suicide hotline and we studied domestic violence, and it's called grandiose gestures of affection, and all abusers tend to do this. So I think the equivalent of what we're seeing is they're hoping to start conversation around the water cooler at various people's offices that says, we really need to be light on these guys because, they did a lot of wrong things and they covered things up, and some of their members were doing very evil stuff and were hurting kids, but not all of them. And you know what? Now they're being honest, and now they're telling us the truth. And wow, they've been hiding some amazing stuff. And oh my God, where did these ruins come from, and who built them? And
well, that's the question. Let me ask you that directly, David, because Nick just asked this in Twitter, where he says, "What's with the Nazi?"
Well, what we're hearing is that they are finding a great deal of giant humanoid bodies in the ice. There's a massive number of dead bodies that they're finding in the ice. But they are removing the ones that are the giants with the elongated skulls, and those giant skeletons were being found all the time in the 1800s on into the early 1900s, and then the whole thing basically got rubbed out of the media. So what we're actually dealing with down there is a series of ruins that were built by a group that crash-landed there approximately 55,000 years ago, and it was an extraterrestrial civilization that had originally lived on Mars and the planet they blew up that's now the asteroid belt, which was like Earth before it blew up. Some of them survived on the moon for many hundreds of thousands of years, because this original catastrophic event was 500,000 years ago.
Right.
Some of the survivors were on the moon. They got wiped out. And apparently what we're now hearing, as I try to integrate information now from 3 different main sources, actually 4. And these are all guys that don't necessarily agree with each other or even like each other. But they're all telling me the same stuff, which is totally amazing, because these are the very highest sources I have, and they're all saying the same thing. And what they're telling me is, if I put it all together, that there are 3 craft that have been found that are actual motherships under the ice in Antarctica, and this is going to be publicly announced in stages. These motherships are literally 30 miles wide. They're kind of oval-shaped. They're sort of circular, but they're oval-shaped, and they hold many, many craft inside of them. And there are 3 of them that were found, and they're jokingly calling them the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria.
Interesting.
One of the 3 has been partially excavated. What they do is they take these big bags of water, plastic bags, they drop them down a chute that they're making, and as the bag gets to the bottom, they hit it with very intense microwaves. It instantaneously boils the water, and the steam melts more of the ice, like another 40 feet of ice. And so pretty quickly they can bore down through that 3-mile ice cap and get down to where this thing is.
Is that why, this is again from Twitter from Roger, is that why Google is blurring things out? There's always, some white cloud in the way when you're starting to look at stuff in Antarctica.
There are probably going to be things in Antarctica that are anomalous. However, these ruins, these particular 3 motherships, which are not even the real motherships, they're only kind of like a small mothership compared to the size of what they did have.
Right.
But these are not something you're going to see on Google Earth no matter what.
That's right.
Very advanced satellite telemetry using unconventional technology in order to find these.
Are there other countries involved in this, or right now is it just us?
Oh, look. This has been going on since 2002. There's a 14-year study of these ruins involving major university professors, and they have been documenting all of their research as they go for the last 14 years. And all of this stuff at some point is going to be brought forth publicly. These people are going to become huge celebrities, and anybody who was talking about this, like Graham Hancock or Rand and Rose Flemass, they're going to become huge, huge public figures at that point, because they will have been proven correct. And what I've been told is that we're actually getting authorization from the U.S. government, which is now basically in the control of the alliance. The cabal's on the losing side. We're now getting authorized to reveal this information. And there are a whole lot of things that are going to all come out at the same time, including the fact that apparently and I didn't know if I was going to be able to say this, but I got clearance to say this too. It started with something Fulford leaked. Benjamin Fulford leaked it on his blog, and I got independent confirmation from 2 other sources. All of the major U.S. military aircraft carriers have all been brought back to port, and they are all being restocked and re-outfitted, which can take 6 months of 24-hour-a-day work. They're being restocked and re-outfitted with all kinds of technology that they weren't going to tell us about for 100 years. And they're all being loaded up with it right now. And this includes 3 different types of drones that look kind of like the quadcopters, but they're full size. There's 3 different sizes of them, and each aircraft carrier is being equipped with dozens of these. And if you want to see what they look like, go watch Avatar or the Tom Cruise movie Edge of Tomorrow, where the letters it says live, die, repeat.
Right.
So they've been showing us this military hardware. Also, if you look at a movie like The Avengers, or if you look at a movie like Captain America, Winter Soldier, they got these floating aircraft carriers. Those are also apparently going to be released as official disclosure.
Well, to get ahead of the cabal, shouldn't the Alliance release this Antarctica story first?
Well, that's what is happening. The Alliance has asked us, and by us I mean myself, Corey Good. I'm actually not aware of anybody else publicly doing this yet who's actually getting briefings, but we're trying to do our part here to release this on behalf of the Alliance so that the cabal does not control the narrative of how this is leaked. That's the big key, because they want to use it to try to further their control, to try to create controversy where people say, well, wait a minute, we can't punish these guys.
Right.
If they die, the secrets die with them. And I'm not even saying they should be killed. But I do think that they need to be prevented from continuing to create destructive influence.
Are there ETs associated with the cabal that are hiding in, like, unaware people or in between dimensions?
Hiding in unaware people?
Yes.
I don't believe in shape-shifting biological life. So the whole shape-shifting reptilian thing, no. All the best sources I have say that does not happen. There are beings that are essentially artificial that are made out of little robots called nanites, and those things can shape-shift into whatever they want. And they actually discovered this was a big problem in the 1970s in the White House. They had these things pooling down and looking like carpets and then reanimating themselves, and they could impersonate anybody in the White House. And so since the early 70s, they've had very sophisticated countermeasures that have prevented those types of beings from getting in.
Right, right.
But as far as actual biological life forms, we're
Right.
all subject to the same basic laws. And in fact, no ETs that we've ever found have, depending on who you talk to, nobody has more than about a 4 to 12% discrepancy in the structure of their DNA from us. So throughout the cosmos, we're all pretty biologically similar.
Now, we're going to hit a break here, so I'll get this in, give you a chance to answer this. With the Draco and Antarctica, obviously, and their connection going back to World War II and the Nazis, is there going to be some Draco sightings or a disclosure when it comes to Antarctica as well?
Well, here's one of the interesting things. Both U.S. Marines and Canadian Marines have been taking out these underground bases, and they weren't necessarily on a need-to-know basis of what they were going to see. And so I've been hearing from my insiders that there's been some great shock in some of these Marines, because when they infiltrated these bases, they saw reptilian-looking humanoids fighting alongside regular humans like us, defending their home turf. And that was very traumatizing and shocking to many of these Marines when they saw this. So we do know that there have been, for the last approximately 375,000 years, there have been these predatory reptilian extraterrestrials in our solar system, and they did have a major outpost on Earth, and Antarctica was and still is their primary base of operation. However, our military-industrial complex now has parity with the reptilians in terms of the sophistication of their weaponry. And that has created a very decisive tipping point in the war, in which the reptilians are now being largely defeated. And, you know, you bring this up very spontaneously right before a break, and I've been trying to be very credible in how I do this. So I do just want to point out that one of our new guys is this World War II veteran, William Tompkins, who debriefed 29 different embedded spies in Nazi Germany. And they were shocked as they were bringing these stories back from the German space program, finding out that the Germans were in fact working with these extraterrestrials that had reptilian characteristics, which seems ridiculous.
Well, that's right. And we've got to take a network break right here. And so we'll pick up right there when we come back. Our guest tonight, David Wilcock. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to Coast. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Again, Twitter on fire. Wow. And I've got follow me on Twitter, @JChurchRadio. That's all you got to do. Post your questions or comments right there. And David, this just came in right on target with the conversation that we're having. And Matthew says, if life elsewhere didn't really exist, then why does every federal agent see deny? Why do they deny it so hard? And that's exactly the point, isn't it?
Well, we're dealing with a long-term psychological operation in place to deny us the truth about UFOs for several different reasons. One of the reasons, of course, being that their propulsion systems would force the government to release technology that would eventually eliminate the need for fuel and eliminate the need for a money system. Because most of capitalism is based on energy as being the basic unit that is how wealth is evolved from. And so if energy no longer has to be paid for, then you've essentially destroyed the economy. And so like when Ralph Ring was building Otis Carr's version of the Tesla flying saucer,
right,
and they came in and shut him down, they said, you're threatening the entire economy of the United States. So I wanted to point out something about this event that we're telegraphing is going to happen. The people who listen to this show are in probably a minority of people who will be absolutely thrilled and overjoyed by this news.
How so?
Well, because you're going to be seeing films of these college professors that have been stationed in Antarctica since 2002, walking around amongst stone ruins and showing very advanced technological artifacts that they found that are greatly superior to anything we have now. And then those technologies are going to start to be disclosed and used in the public. Now, most of the people that would listen to this show are going to see this as a good thing, but I do want to point out something that the insiders have been telling me is one of the big concerns is that this will be seen as a mass trauma by many people. And it will be so upsetting because, remember, fear doesn't have information. Fear is a blind panic a lot of times. Fear comes in the absence of information. And so people are not going to have the time or the ability to necessarily do this research for themselves. They're going to suspect that it's a trick. They're going to be worried about, could this happen to us again? Could our society be washed under in tidal waves, and could we all be destroyed? They're going to be worried about aliens, which they never necessarily believed were true before. Even some people who thought they believed it didn't really, really believe it. So there's going to be all kinds of stuff like this that happens in which the effect could be like a 9/11 or even bigger. Even though some people are going to be very positive about it, other people are going to be really, really panicking. And so imagine what happens if you've got a very upsetting war crimes tribunal in which Pizzagate type of stuff is now public, and then this gets dropped on everybody at the same time. Wouldn't it have the effect of really distracting people from the tribunal?
Would it almost be like a pardon?
That's what they're hoping for.
Right.
They're also hoping, remember, how does the cabal do its magic best? They need a huge diversion, and they need everybody traumatized, and then they can make things happen very quickly because traumatized people will bypass their normal ethics and their normal sense of right and wrong, and they'll want justice, and they'll also, make emotional decisions.
Well, wouldn't it be a combination of two things, though, David? And I know you and I have talked about this before, but I would love the audience to hear your answer. We would have the trauma. I would be traumatized, okay? So there would be the trauma, but then there's the other side at the same time with the same people where that question has been answered, right? And there is the relief that we're not alone. And we can move on now, and let's look at other things. Wouldn't it be a combination of both?
Yeah, I'm much more inclined towards what you just said, and I wouldn't have even pointed out the mass trauma part if it wasn't something that the highest levels of this are concerned about.
Right, it's a goal.
So Also, and I want to redirect everybody back to the timeline of this, because I wrote my definitive Pizzagate investigation somewhere around December the 6th, I believe. And then I wrote the follow-up to it less than a week later. I think it was around December 11th or something.
It was when you were on my show, because
right.
You released it the day before and you called me. Right.
So Corey was getting information from his people in the military-industrial complex secret space program, which we've talked about in the article and so forth. I'm not going to redefine that right now, but
right.
They have flying black triangles and things like this. They told us, you guys need to run your asses off to get this stuff out there, because if you don't, you're going to be scooped, and it's going to appear that you're just copying something that has made it into these tabloid websites. So we worked like crazy, and I managed to get this thing posted on my website, a very comprehensive investigation. 2 hours later, tabloid websites started to talk about, for the very first time, cities under the ice in Antarctica, and what if we find cities? And then the day after I published the article, the UK Daily Express came out with a much more comprehensive article that talked about how conspiracy theorists are on fire because film footage from 2002 was found earlier this year from Antarctica discovering ruins down there, a group of college professors that have been missing since 2002. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm one of the grand poobahs of conspiracy theory. So are you, Jimmy.
Yep.
Nobody ever told us about anything like that.
That's right.
If it was out there, the alternative community would have torn it apart like a pack of hungry dogs.
Oh, check this out. Okay, we have 15 minutes before midnight, right? For you and I, we're still on Friday the 13th, right? Well, the first apocalyptic alarm of 2017 was being raised by conspiracy theorists around the world because today we had a trio of events all at the same time. We had the year's first full moon, Friday the 13th, and Venus being the brightest it's been in 8 years. Right. And it was supposed to be doomsday today. Well, we've got 13 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Still okay.
Yeah, we're still here, brother.
So look, I'm very, very excited about this coming out. And since I published Endgame 2, Corey Good has had other briefings that gave us more information than what we had in Endgame 2. I had never published these. And then the night before last night, I call Pete Peterson, and he was very aware of the group that had been recently contacting Corey since about last maybe February or March of last year. He was very aware of who they are and what they told him, and Pete and I start comparing notes of things that Corey had told me off the record, on the phone. Nobody's heard this ever. And Pete knew all the same stuff. But then it wasn't also exactly the same. There were things that Pete had heard that Corey hadn't heard, and vice versa. And that really was shocking to me. So for my own personal level of validation, this thing is unprecedented in my entire career history. I have never heard such a convergence of insider information on one subject. And everybody's going to want to know, well, when are they going to say this stuff? They're already doing it. If you go to the Express, express.co.uk, which is a tabloid type of website, almost every day now they're coming out with some article about ruins in Antarctica. They're getting us ready. They have to start by doing it this way. And what the Alliance has said they want, and this is something I got through Pete, they want us talking about it this way first, before the stage of it being publicly announced.
Why?
Because it softens the blow. It kind of gets the people who are already inclined to believe this stuff more ready for it. It gives them time to process it so that we, in turn, will be able to have educated ourselves and then help people process this who are not so ready for it and might be more prone to be traumatized. Because remember, the cabal would see that trauma as a very useful distraction.
Right,
so that
right.
They can no longer have to be on tribunals. Oh, well, in light of these astonishing events, we can't have these tribunals right now. Everybody needs to focus on stunning, civilization-defining breakthrough that's as important as Jesus Christ,
Yeah, and what's interesting here, and I brought this up at the beginning of the show, is that why have the Vatican go down and Kerry and Buzz Aldrin? Those are three distinctly different groups of people to go down. Were they going down to see the same thing? Were they looking at different things? Or did they need a cross-reference, a cross-section of society to go down and see this disclosure at the same time?
I will give you some very brand new information right now.
Let's go.
Nobody's ever heard.
Let's go.
The reason why Buzz Aldrin had the problems that he did with his health was altitude sickness. Because he was brought on a craft that in 7 minutes brought him to a height of 200,000 miles, which means the backside of the moon. And apparently, in the course of those 7 minutes of altitude gain, he issued expletives 7 times in a row, and was absolutely shocked. And the shock apparently was what messed up his heart. And so he was in some kind of a flying black triangle type of craft that took off from Antarctica, in addition to him getting to see the ruins. He flew around the backside of the moon, and then on the way back in, he passed by a craft that is kind of like a circular sort of floating city that has, again, it's about a half mile wide, but then it projects a cloud that's about 5 miles wide in the sky, and it looks like a cloud from every angle, so you don't see this thing. It's cloaked from the surface of the Earth.
And he was wearing a T-shirt that said,
"Get your ass to Mars."
Get your ass to Mars. Can I say that on the air? Dan, did you just bleep me? Am I okay? I'm all right? Okay. Well, David said it first. Okay.
And also we were told that the craft that Buzz was in did something called a wing wave to the base as it went past.
And what about Kerry?
Well, Kerry went down there on Election Day. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, very.
And apparently one of the things that's happened is that the people who have been going down there are very excited because there are new ruins that, even for the people who know everything on the inside, that are at cosmic clearance and above, they're getting to see new stuff that they didn't know about before. So let's go back to these 3 motherships that supposedly crashed here about 55,000 years ago. This is the origin of the story of the fallen angels in the Bible. This is the story of Lucifer. These are the fallen angels. They were giants with elongated skulls. Their ships crashed here, and they deliberately crashed in what is now Antarctica because they knew there were very, very ancient ruins in that part of the Earth. And by very ancient, I mean potentially 2 billion years old or older. And that's a whole other thing I've talked about extensively in my book, The Ascension Mysteries, which I think is going to become a defining textbook for all this as this all goes public. And it's going to affect my life in ways that I'm not really looking forward to. But I certainly will accept, that role of helping to educate people. Anyway, they had to cannibalize their ships and use the material from their ships because they knew they weren't leaving. The ships were badly damaged. And so they used those ships to build their infrastructure. And one of the things they set up was a massive cloning program because they didn't have a very big population. So they cloned their own genetics with this long, spindly body and the elongated skull with human DNA from Earth. And they created different types of beings, some of which were giants, some of which were not, some of which had elongated skulls, some of which did not. And they built up a population this way. And so when we're looking at the true nature of the cabal as it exists today, the reason why they're so into royal bloodlines, the reason why they stay intermarried, how they manage to get control of the financial system, how they manage to have such an unfair advantage over the world, it's because these people were a lot more intelligent than everybody else here when they got here. And they did manage to infiltrate and take over world governments all over the planet. And they never really lost power, they just keep rebranding. So the Roman Empire seems to lose power, but they actually just migrated to Great Britain and rebranded as the British Empire. And these people are finally now on the verge of being exposed. So one of the things the Alliance really wants to do early in the game is identify these people, whereas the Cabal doesn't want the identity of these giants with elongated skulls ever to be known. That's one of their most guarded secrets. So it's certainly going to be a very interesting series of events in terms of how this goes down, what is said, and Jimmy, you are very aware, because you and I have been talking about this on a personal level, of the extraordinary hacker attacks that are being done against everyone in our field, you included.
That's right.
To try to make it utterly impossible for anybody who's going to YouTube to see our new stuff, because 20 to 50 new videos a day of our old stuff is being called new and uploaded as if it were new. So I encourage everybody who's listening to this show, if you find these fake videos that are not new but they're acting as if they're new, report them for abuse, because we are having a tremendous problem.
A tremendous one. I'll say this. I mean, I don't do any, grandiose self-promotion on Coast, but I will say this, that if you are there are 3 YouTube channels out there that handle all of this. That is David's, mine, and Corey's. That's it. That's it. And if there's anything else out there, if you are on another channel, you will know those 3 channels with, we have large amounts of subscribers and official marks and all of that. But there's only 3.
Right.
And
mine is David Wilcock 333. Corey's is Steer Being Alliance, and yours is Fade to Black.
That's it. That's the end of the story right there. Anything else, and it's being allowed to propagate. Also, it is something that for us and the people that come to us for information, they're being misled down another path, and there's other things that are even darker than that are going on, and it also involves our websites too as well.
Yeah. I had somebody somehow manage to post a link to either a malware or a phishing site in my forums. And it is so difficult to track down that link that we have had to deactivate and take offline my entire forum, because with 10 years worth of data in it, right? 15 really.
Right.
Because we can't find this needle in a haystack, and if it's there, Google bans us from their entire search engine.
And it shows up that way. We've got to take a break right here. David, it's Friday night. Will you hang out with us, my friend, and take some phone calls?
Let me have it, buddy.
That's what I'm talking about. Our guest tonight, David Wilcock. It's Friday the 13th. We're going to open up the phone lines. Your calls are next. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Coast AM. I'm sitting in for George tonight. That's right. It's Friday the 13th. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. All right, David, you ready?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, let's do this. Let's go to one of our old friends, Old Faithful here. Let's go to Wild Card. Chris in Long Island, New York. Welcome to Coast. Say hi to David Wilcock.
Hey, Jimmy. Hey, Dave. How you guys doing?
Doing good, Chris.
Well, I had a question for David in terms of reading his new book, Defense Mysteries, which I'm very enjoying very much.
Thanks.
And one of the chapters was Nikola Tesla, the Pete Peterson and Nikola Tesla Black Ops.
Yep.
One of them is about Black Jesus, where there's a ascended being appearing in Africa.
Yep.
And I just want to know if you know any more information you would share with us, because I thought that was very captivating to me, and I just wanted more information on it.
Yeah. The Black
Thank you,
Jesus
Chris.
story. The Black Jesus story was probably one of the most shocking things I ever heard. It came from my insider, Jacob, I call him that in the book, who actually was working for the Rothschilds and still does, and also is a whistleblower who doesn't really do what they want but continues to work for them because he feels like there's some very serious extraterrestrial threats to Earth and that what they're doing is very necessary to protect us. So the story goes that in the 1960s, there was a black man in Africa who came in with abilities complementary to those of Jesus. And he was performing miracles. He was starting to get people to listen to what he had to say. and the Cabal tried to kill him, and, they could shoot him in the head, and his skull would just regenerate, and the flesh would grow back, and he was fine. And, so the crazy story that I heard, and remember, I was told at the time that if I disclosed this, that I would be killed, and I ended up putting it in the book anyway. But the story was that this guy, they finally said, okay, we're going to bring you to the United Nations and share your message with the world. Let's get you on this flight. They bring him on this flight, and instead of bringing him to the United Nations, they shot him repeatedly, and then actually had some kind of meat grinder device, and basically like a bandsaw, I guess, and sawed up his body into a whole bunch of pieces, put him in these very like radioactive shielded containers, and then had all these fighter jets dock with the plane and fly his body parts to all corners of the world, where then these containers turned them into ash. And they thought that maybe this would defeat him, like that his body somehow, the tissue was necessary. So if they destroyed all the tissue in all these places across the world, maybe they could defeat him. Well, he then regenerated in their offices and was fully fine, fully intact. But the sad part is that he said, you guys so badly do not want me to be here that I am not going to be able to do any more. You're going to get what you want, but bear in mind that in the future, many others like me will be coming, and when they do, you will not be able to stop us.
Wow. Well,
that is all I know. Unfortunately,
right.
There's nothing more to the story than that.
Incredible.
But it is an incredible story.
Incredible. Let's go to Wild Card. Thomas, right here in California. Thomas, you're up next on Coast.
Jimmy, thank you for taking my call. And David, it's always a pleasure to hear your interviews. And I look forward to obtaining your latest book on the Ascension. David, my question is about direct contact with extraterrestrials. There have to be benevolent, trustworthy extraterrestrials out there. And how can the average man, the average woman of the coast-to-coast universe have direct contact with benevolent, trustworthy extraterrestrials without having to go through intermediaries like the Alliance or the Cabal or the military-industrial complex or national intelligence agencies or transnational corporations, but actual, direct, face-to-face, no intermediaries contact with benevolent, trustworthy extraterrestrials?
Got it.
Excellent question, Thomas.
So
David?
It's actually ironic that he asked this question, because that is the big question that the reader of Ascension Mysteries is left with. And I am writing another book right now called Awakening in the Dream, Contact with the Divine, that is exactly that. It's exactly what his question is. So the short and sweet answer is that when you're dealing with the benevolent folks in the universe, they found that if they were to appear in front of people in person too quickly, that people would be worshipped by others as some kind of guru or savior figure, and that the people themselves would have ego problems that would develop where they would feel entitled or special or otherwise different.
Right.
So what usually happens in the case of ET contact, what I'm going to outline in my new book, and we're haggling over the release date right now. It may be August 2017, it may be September 2017, and it may be spring 2018, and that's not fixed yet. But it will be one of those three. So you will generally start having these experiences in dreams. And so I would highly, highly condition people to think that a dream might not just be a dream. One of the things I've heard from Corey Good is that people are having ET contacts, and then the dream will be partially what actually happened and partially a screen memory. It will be slightly distorted, or sometimes greatly distorted. So, but in the greater sense, I would say that we all have a higher self, and the higher self tries to communicate to us through mystery, and the mystery usually will start with things that most people would call coincidence and I would call synchronicity. So that's why I wrote a whole book called The Synchronicity Key, where I scientifically proved the existence of synchronicity as a bona fide fact. So you'll start to get these things happening that really defy common sense and logic, and that's your clue that invites you into the deeper mysteries. If you want to have the more profound types of spiritual experiences in direct contact with your higher self, I think dream work is a very highly useful discipline, but ultimately you're going to need to meditate. These beings will not be able to reach you, and they do start telepathically. They'll not be able to reach you telepathically if you don't get control over the monkey mind that's always chattering with all kinds of self-defeating and judgmental thoughts about others. And so when you can start to control that thought and get yourself into a nice, clear, coherent consciousness, that's where the criteria for contact will begin. And as we move forward through the changes that I'm now describing, people are going to start to have very dramatic experiences of contact that will appear to be like ghosts or entities in the room. And when that happens, we know that when that starts happening on a mass level, we know that we're very close to this solar event that I've talked about in the Ascension Mysteries book. That is a very, very interesting subject where the sun apparently is going to give off a big flash of energy, and after it does, what it means to be human will have fundamentally changed in a very dramatic way, almost instantaneously.
Yeah, we had a solar event and a flyby of a meteor yesterday. Both
that
in
is
the
true.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Let's go to Wild Card. Joe, way out east in the Bronx, New York. Joe, you're up next.
Hey, Jimmy, how's it going?
It's going good, Joe. Say hi to David.
Hey, David. How are you, David?
I'm doing good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing okay, thank you. I wanted to ask you, now, concerning the reptilians, is it their quest or their mission to try to gain control of major powers like the U.S. and Russia?
Yep. Do you want me to enunciate further on that, or do you have more to the question? Okay. All right, so what are the reptilians? There's been a lot of confusion around this. The reptilians are basically racists, and it's a group of beings that went around the galaxy seeing all these different human populations, and they found that there were certain... So basically, just as a starter point here, the biosphere that we see on Earth, the biome that we have, meaning plants, insects, marine life, animal life, birds, etc., mammals, this is very, very common on any inhabited Earth-like planet, and most of the Earth-like planets are inhabited. Life is very, very prolific. NASA has already publicly stated there's 40 billion with a B, 40 billion watery Earth-like planets just in our galaxy. That is official. It's in the Ascension Mysteries book. So, there are human populations on these planets, and this is because evolution ultimately is written into the laws of quantum physics. We're used to thinking of quantum physics as this very abstract stuff that only mathematicians can understand, when in fact it is actually a biological matrix that makes DNA and proteins and cells and life. So the types of organisms that we see in the animal kingdom here on Earth, there's all different ways that one of those types can become a human-looking being, and it depends on the climate and the conditions of that planet, and to some degree the actual consciousness of the planet and the sun as to which of these types of beings become sentient. So you could and do have planets that are entirely oceanic, where they don't have any continental mass above the surface of the oceans. And then you're going to have an aquatic species, and it could be any of a variety of types like we see in our oceans, that become humanoid and sentient, and they will have, limbs and heads with eyes, nose, mouth, ears, just like we have, or more or less similar. Then on planets where they do have land, you might have bird-like beings. You might have beings that look like they're kind of cat-like human or a dog-like human. And in some cases, you do have reptilians. It's not very common. So the reptilians, for whatever reason, maybe because of the heritage of the reptilian brain, they have tended to be more aggressive species. And so a very dominant, very intelligent, very reptilian group has found other natural reptilian stocks in our galaxy. They invaded these planets. They blended their DNA with the native populations, so these populations now are hybrids, and they formed this confederation. They have been making war on non-reptilian species all over the galaxy, and they've been largely defeated and got beaten back into our little corner here. So they have an outpost in the constellation Orion, and they have an outpost here in our solar system, and those are their two main centers of operation.
Hey, Joe, I want to thank you for the phone call. We're going to head towards a break right here. Thank you so much. And, David, what do you say? Okay, I have two questions before the break. Let's get these in from me.
Okay.
A, what do you say to the people that insist that you are a disinfo agent, number one? And number two, what about your DNA? Two simple answers. Have you had your DNA checked? So let's get those in. You've got 2 minutes.
It's pretty odd. Why did I get a 179 when I took the IQ test? Why did they tell me I scored too high that they couldn't actually even tell me what my IQ was because it was off the chart? Why do I see things that other people don't see? And for me, it's like obvious and easy. And if I talk too fast, then people don't have any idea what I'm talking about. Why did it take me many years to learn how to dumb myself down enough that people could understand me? I don't know. I do think there's probably some kind of extraterrestrial aspect to my personality or my soul or whatever that is different from most people.
You look E.T.-ish.
I do kind of have an elongated skull.
Yeah, you got something going on. Okay.
Yeah. And then as far as disinformation, when you're looking at the people who are doing this on behalf of the cabal,
right,
they're trying to promote a Luciferian belief system because that's the cabal's religion. I've been exposing it for many years.
Interesting.
And what that belief system entails is the exact opposite of what I keep telling people over and over again. Their belief is like Darwinian, the most effective killers are the most evolved. They're very hierarchical. They want to always put the power back in the hands of the cabal. They want to say might makes right. They want to encourage moral laxity. They want to encourage corrupt behavior, sexual looseness. And I have been just the opposite. I have been encouraging people to embrace the core of all the world's great spiritual teachings, which focuses on forgiveness, compassion, and helping other people.
Well, let's take a break right here, David. I don't want to cut you off. This is Coast to Coast AM. Our guest is David Wilcock, and we're going to keep doing phone calls because it's Friday the 13th. We'll be right back. I've got to share this with you. Check this out. The British government is moving ahead right now in a highly controversial plan to build a tunnel under Stonehenge. Some things you just can't make up. And they're trying to ease the traffic around the ancient monument. It's absolutely nuts. Now, this is where it gets crazy. It's costing $2.4 billion with a B. The project will see a major highway expansion that includes the construction of a nearly 2-mile-long stretch of road directly beneath those beautiful megalithic stones. Now, this is where I trip. What is underneath stone? What are we doing? Destroying what's underneath? We don't even know, right? Is somebody going to check this out, or are we just going to bore a tunnel underneath Stonehenge without checking it out? Read the full story right now in the news section over at coasttocoastam.com. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'm sitting in for George Norrie tonight. It's Friday the 13th, and I've got David Wilcock right here taking your calls. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Coast AM. And David, I want to thank you for hanging out with us tonight. You've done a full 3 hours with us and an hour full of phone calls. So before we end this segment, I just want to say thank you from the Coast audience and from all of us here. And with that, let's try to do the best we can heading out here to end the third quarter. Let's go to Heather, east of the Rockies in Katy, Texas. Heather, you're up next.
Hi, David. This is Heather Sartain.
Hey, yeah, we just had 2 episodes of you on Gaia.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Heather, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you. This show is keeping me awake tonight. I love the topic. My question about Antarctica is, what do you think of Admiral Richard Byrd's flight logs and the stories surrounding that?
Sure. You're talking about Operation High Jump, which is a historical case of immediate post-World War II era, 1947, where the Nazi scientists that had been brought over from Germany, probably under some pretty unpleasant interrogations, gave up information that the Nazis had this base in Antarctica. And the U.S. government sent a whole fleet of ships with full military armament. This is post-World War II, so they had all the buildup, and they didn't have any war to fight. So they sent a massive invasion force down there, and they were greeted by an incredible degree of resistance, including flying disc-shaped craft, which the term flying saucer wasn't even invented until that same year later on with the Kenneth Arnold sightings. But the term wasn't even known of yet, and they were very heavily attacked by these craft and actually limped home and were not able to gain any more information. So from that, there was disinformation that was planted out in the media, including the idea that they saw mastodons and primitive men and women, and that they were looking into the hollow earth. So that was a government-planted piece of disinformation to hide the truth, which was that they had, in fact, encountered these UFOs that greatly surprised them with attacks and caused a lot of damage.
There you go, Heather. Thank you so much. Have you had a good New Year?
Oh, yeah. It's been a really good year. I'm working a lot. I'm working on a book as well. It's like having 3 jobs.
Well, it is having 3 jobs, Heather. Let's not. Oh, man. Well, listen, have a great, safe rest of your 2017, okay?
I will. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wow, that was interesting. I didn't expect that. Neither did you, David. I'm sure we were both caught by surprise. Let's go to west of the Rockies, Colleen in Rockland, California. Colleen, you're up next.
Hi, Jimmy, and hi, David. You two, I'm your biggest fan out here, both of you. David, I live up here in Northern California, up above Sacramento, on the way up to Lake Tahoe, and we've had flood up here, as if you've paid attention, and it sounds like you have, to the weather up here. We've had so much rain, and I thought to myself during this deluge of the time that this is like it. I'm 65 years old. This is how it used to be.
Yep.
In the Bay Area all the time. You know, every winter we had tons of rain. And the drought, I always suspected, as you have talked about, that it was the chemtrails. Somebody was trying to control the agriculture here in California, the breadbasket of the world.
Yep.
And my question for you is this. Are we going to stop seeing chemtrails?
Well, you also spoke about the drought, so let's start with that first.
Okay.
I did get very high-level intel, again, authorized, and these are sources that are as high on Earth as it gets. The people that Pete are speaking to are at the very top of the command structure of the Alliance.
Uh-huh.
And we have heard that all of the rain that is coming into California is the result of 3 months of work now since the Alliance has gained control of these weather control technologies. And even though there is damage being done by the flooding, their determination is that they need to replenish our water table right now during the season that it's going to rain. And in fact, the latest statistics are, and this is even fake stream media saying this, 40% of California is now completely drought-free. And that's before any other storms hit us, and we still have a few months to go. So the drought's over, and that's amazing. Although I did not get any specific information saying this in so many words, since the chemtrails are both extraterrestrial in nature and cabal in nature, there's both types of negative groups doing this, and the fact that these groups have been neutralized, I do not expect that chemtrails are happening now, nor will they continue.
Thank you for the phone call, Colleen. That was excellent. And let's go to the first-time caller line, Jordana in San Diego. Jordana, you're up next.
Hi, Jimmy and David. I'm a really big fan, and I'm going to Joshua Tree. And Conrad DeFlon says hi to David.
Cool.
You remember him? UFO abductee.
Yep.
So I have a question and also an experience, recent. And the question is, I don't hear anything in the news necessarily about the Obama administration handing over the United States internet to Russia, China, and Iran October 1st, 2016, a month before the election. They don't mention anything like that. Do you have any insight on why this is not being mentioned?
Are you speaking about the lifting of the ICANN regulations where
like
the U.S. was the
head
of the whole Internet hub?
Yeah. Or Jordana, I'm going to say thank you for the phone call. I want to try to get a couple more in before the top of the hour. We have to say bye to David. So thank you for the phone call and a great question. And have a great rest of your new year. David, ICANN and the United Nations and the Internet, I think that was one of the most craziest things of 2016.
I wouldn't get too caught up in nationalism at this point because what we're calling the cabal is a multinational group in which these three cities within countries, the Vatican City being their spiritual center, the City of London being their financial center, and Washington, D.C. being their military center.
Right.
Getting the Internet away from the hands of the U.S. was not a bad thing. It was actually instrumental in the defeat of the cabal because much of the alliance has been internationally based. And we are hearing that almost immediately after Trump's inauguration, we're going to start to get war crimes tribunals. And that gives me something to feel positively about with him winning. And I really look forward to that and hope that it will happen soon. And if it does, the cabal's final move is going to be to disclose Atlantis and Antarctica to try to distract everybody and hopefully get better treatment. But they're already in a triage situation. They're already on the run. A lot of them have already been defeated or surrendered. And there's also a great number of people who have already disclosed and have already had their testimonies filmed. And all those films will be played once this all comes out. This is probably going to be the most significant year in anybody's memory in recorded history, what we're about to see unfolding this year.
Let's try to get some more calls in here. Now, what's interesting, David, phones are completely jammed, and we've actually got a Skype call coming in because everything else is full. So I'm going to do this. Let's go to Klaus in Canada on Skype. You're up next.
Hello. Hi, Jimmy. Hi, David. This has been a very exciting show tonight. I just had a question and maybe I could share a dream with the world.
Well, Klaus, if you could, for me, please, because we're out of time, let's just have the question. Is that cool?
Yes. I was wondering if you could maybe just comment on Dr. Stephen Greer's work with CE5 and maybe France.
Okay. Go ahead. Oh,
that's a question for Mr. Wilcock.
Okay. Klaus, you're breaking up on the Skype line. I'm really sorry about that, my friend, but it was cutting in and out.
I can speak about the CE5 stuff. I think I get where he was going to go here. First of all, Dr. Greer has come out recently and made some speeches in which he has questioned the credibility of Corey Good's information, my information, William Tompkins. In fact, he actually called Good and Tompkins mind-controlled super soldiers. And his line of reasoning was that there are only benevolent ETs in the universe. Now, on a strictly academic level, as a scholar, every ancient teaching that we talk about on shows like Ancient Aliens, which I'm in almost all the episodes of, there's always good and bad ETs battling each other. So what he's doing is he's expressing an opinion statement, which I respect because it's based on the insiders that he has had contact with.
Right.
But from a wider academic perspective, it does not hold weight. And these insiders who I refer to have passed every test of validity that I have, which is basically a combination of what do the overall aggregate of insider testimonies say, and where is the thrust of that.
Well, and the same thing goes with there are good humans and bad humans.
Absolutely.
There's good dogs and bad dogs.
Absolutely.
Right? Good cats and bad cats. You know, you get two parakeets. You get two parakeets. One of them, you know, tear your eyes out. I'm just saying.
And I want to point this out, Jimmy. Nobody knows this yet. I'm going to announce it right now. Believe it or not, Corey had a high-level hack against his own computer 2 nights ago, and it deleted all of the notes that were going to become our Endgame 3 article. And now he's on vacation, and he's not going to be writing during that time, so it's been left to me to disclose this. So given the attacks against him, the attacks against me, the very intense stuff that's going on, I've been telling everybody, please sign up on my website, dwilcock.com. That's dwilcock.com. And put in your email address there, and that makes sure that if I actually get taken offline for what I'm doing, which could happen, that I'll still be able to get in touch with everybody because I'll have your email address, and you get free books and free audio and all kinds of good extra gifts for doing that, and it doesn't cost anything. So as far as contacting extraterrestrials, which is the CE5 protocol, yes, that does work, and I would again say that meditating and trying to still your mind is going to be the best way to invite more of those experiences in.
That's exactly right. And I'm watching Twitter. Twitter is just, it's absolutely out of control right now. Now, we're at the end here. I want to say this. You're going to be speaking at the Conscious Life Expo. That's coming up February 10th through the 13th. Of course, I'm going to be there. You're going to be there. George Norrie's going to be there. Tommy's going to be there. I heard that Tommy's arriving in a very large stretch Hummer limousine. But anyway, it's one of the most exciting conferences in the country all year long, and it's kicking off conference season, of course, right here in Los Angeles at the LAX Hilton. What are you going to be speaking about this year? Well, I held them off for a really long time on my conference descriptions, which of course had everybody on the edge of their seat, and I didn't actually send them in until mid-December. I am going to be talking about Antarctica. I am going to be talking about this intel, and I'm going to bring it right up to the bleeding edge of what I know. Pete Peterson is getting a huge briefing this weekend. It's going to have a lot more information than what I already know tonight as I'm talking. And he also tells me that they have handed him a 6-inch tall stack of briefing documents that he is supposed to hand to me, which I'm then going to be reading and then sharing with everybody out in the world when the time is right. And I don't know how soon that is, but he already has the documents right now. So this is really heating up. What we're hearing about the timeline of when this is going to happen is that it's very imminent. And again, you know, I've been burned many times in the past, but all the signs more than ever are saying this time it's real. We're already seeing a very dramatic end to the drought here in California. In fact, the reservoirs are overflowing and they're having to open the floodgates on them. The ground is completely saturated. That's a huge change for people here in California. Because we were watching everything just drying out and dying. And there are a lot of very tangible signs, like if we publish an article saying that they're going to announce Antarctica is Atlantis, and then all of these articles start coming out immediately afterwards saying just that, I don't think that's because they're copying us. I think that's because our intel was accurate. And so I'm very, very excited about where this is all going. Yeah, it is exciting times. And as you look forward to 2017, where I know you get this question all day long, and you get it from me too, and you're going to get it right now. Do you expect anything in 2017 of the disclosure variety and a large event?
Yeah, it appears that what we're going to get is a partial disclosure, and Corey and I have always said we do not want partial disclosure. We acknowledge that if everybody got the whole truth all at once, it would overwhelm them. But we do want full disclosure, but we want it to happen fairly quickly, not spaced out over 50 or 100 years,
right,
which is ludicrous. But even the partial disclosure scenario that we're now hearing has definitely been approved and is definitely going to roll forward. It will begin with these motherships. It will start with probably more primitive-looking ruins under the ice in Antarctica. Then we get the motherships. Then we find out that they have craft that can fly around our solar system. Then we find out that ships like the ones in Antarctica have also been found on Mars and other places in our solar system. And they just keep widening it and widening it like that.
But David, we're right at the top of the hour, man. You made it through 3 straight hours on Coast to Coast. Thank you so much, my friend, and we'll see you. We'll see you at Conscious Life Expo, February 10th at the LAX Hilton. You're the absolute very best. Thank you, David.